I'm an open book about what I know. I am not the expert, but I do have some expertise. So happy to share what I know. Excellent. So, who am I? I'm Nikki Thibodeau. My pronouns are she, her. What's cool is Bettermode is a Canadian company, and I'm also a Canadian, hailing right now from Montreal, Canada. I've been a community manager in a local city. I've led a global team of community managers. I moved into community operations at like a global center of excellence. And then I was Shopify's first senior community professional or senior community strategist to help scale their efforts across their 10,000 person organization and for their over 2 million customers. Wild to say out loud, hectic time of my life. I was part of a reduction in workforce back in July, and I've since been consulting in the community space ever since. And I also started a community for senior community professionals who I see a lot of y'all in the chat, a space called the Community. And so today when I was thinking about this topic, we're going to be discussing about demonstrating the value of community to key stakeholders. I debated, obviously, with myself about the order of things for this to make the most sense. And I don't love to give like a saturation of data. And so I'm going to give you high level overviews of some concepts. And then I'm going to give you a couple of examples of things that we did at Shopify. So I'm going to start where I think a lot of us know, which is our challenges. And I'd love to see in some interaction in the chat. So there's going to be some times where I say, it's actually on the next slide, where I ask for some participation. And I'd love to see y'all warm up your fingers. I see you've already got some time, some warmth by saying where you're from. So we're going to talk about challenges, then we'll talk about finding your goals and finding your friends with the same goals. Number 3 is like how the heck with data. And then I'll deliver my attempt at a summary, but with ample time for questions. So let's hop into it. So challenges. I'd love to hear what some of the challenges that you're facing in this area of demonstrating the value of community. Type them into the chat. I know me personally, I've experienced lack of buy-in, no direction from leadership, just like make it work. But that's usually as a direct result of the business having poor understanding of what community can do or what community is. Few resources. I had a lead once tell me scrappy, not crappy after an ask for budget. So I feel like maybe y'all have been there before. Rachel, I've experienced all of these. Some of my point in my community career. Yeah. No access to data. That's definitely something that hopefully we can all overcome. Few resources, lack of buy-in and strategy. Jenny says all of these with a sad face. Yeah, I feel ya. Lack of buy-in and direction from Thad. Okay. It seems like we're well versed in our challenges. I want to take a moment, like we just talked about all the womps, but I want to remind you that you are the experts. You and your team are the experts. I was in a course with Brian Oblinger once, about a year ago, and he said, you will forget more about community than most people will know. Isn't that wild? It's so true. You will forget more about community than most people will know. So as we move into this presentation and I talk about finding your goals and storytelling with data, just remember that it's all you, baby. You've got this, okay? So I wanted to like pep you up after we talked about the bad stuff. Excellent. Okay. I love how Lou pointed out that, some of the challenges can be impatience. Right? Leads me right into like, what is the ROI? I feel like we all like had this dude asking us, and this is one of my least favorite questions from leadership, and not because there isn't ROI in community, but because I usually find that it comes with without any direction, right? Like, first of all, like to the person asking this question, like what business outcomes do you care about? What are you hoping that the community can bring to the business? I know that sometimes we get into these scenarios where someone who has no clue is the person we're leading, is our lead, but it's important to involve them in this answer. So I want to back up a little bit. My next slide is going to be asking you a question, so hopefully we're all ready. I do want to point out some things in the chat for people who are watching the recording, but we have Laura who said that like all of the above. Andreas says all of the above. Heather, community is nice to have, but not something the org itself needs in a prior role. Oh, Molly, even after proving ROI and issues that need to be addressed, there's no action, or even worse, the opposite. Let's get rid of the community. I feel you, absolutely. But let's take a step back and think, this is a question to you. What business outcomes can community contribute to? Let's see them in the chat. Maybe this is something that you're currently laddering into or being asked about or thinking about. Customer retention, Erin says. Rachel says brand value, absolutely. Andrew says higher enrollment, top of mind, definitely. Christopher, increasing revenue when you have champions bringing in new accounts, that improved retention. Wow, you guys have so many. I love these. Okay, I cannot keep up. The point is, right? Hypothetically, community can ladder into any of these business goals. So that's awesome. But how do we find the ones that are right for us? They're still coming in the chat. This is so cool. Minimizing support costs, learning about products and services, right? So the first thing we want to do is look at the business unit that we ladder into. Like if you're in marketing, what is marketing reporting on? What can we contribute to the conversation around what we're trying to achieve? What are they're driving toward? It would be smart to ladder the community up into one of those. And then 2, what do your executives care about? This is a really good question to nail down. If you were able to get time with an executive, what is the thing that you could say that would immediately pique their interest? Maybe they would want to give you more resources as a result. And one of your goals should work toward that. And if this could be similar to what your business unit reports on, but I have a hot opinion that community can't be confined to like one area of the business. We can stretch across the entire business. And so when we're thinking about wins, we could think about, okay, how can we win for our business unit, but how can we win for the business in its entirety? And so we can end up setting up relationships across the business. So 2, what do your executives care about? 3, okay, so now we know what the business cares about, but we need to find what the win-win is for our community. So what's best for our community, but also drives those results. This is going to take some work and likely some testing and iterating. So don't expect to be able to guess the recipe right on the first go. And using that recipe analogy, recipes for community is like, at the bottom of like a recipe, it says bake times may vary by oven. That's what community is like. Your oven is, your specific members, your particular scenario, like how many resources you have, what the buy-in is. And so you're going to have to test a little bit and maybe burn some stuff or undercook some stuff before successfully completing a recipe. So just remember that finding the win-win isn't going to be apparent necessarily right off the bat. Cool. Connecting the dots with sales, product, events, and marketing, Laura says, absolutely. And then number 4, what can you realistically accomplish? Like if you set more goals than you can accomplish, you might as well have not set any. Setting goals allows you to pick the right things to test and iterate, and it gives you space to say no to things that won't work toward those goals, which once you start building up those relationships, like across sales, products, events, and marketing, you're likely going to have people asking you to do things that you just don't have the bandwidth for. And so being able to be clear about what your goals are and what's going to help you win, you'll be able to say no a little bit better. And look, hypothetically, community can ladder into all business goals, right? And what you choose will change the types of programming you create and will affect your members. So we want to be really intentional here at this step to make sure that we're choosing the right thing for both the business and for our members, because it's going to be really important. Let's make some friends. So once we have our goals, it's really great to make friends. And you could likely have been making friends along the way. And we want to find folks across the business who are laddering into the same business goals. And this is for multiple reasons. The first thing is we're going to be able to ask them how they're currently reporting on those goals. Where are they getting the data? How are they getting the data? What hasn't worked? And then we're going to be able to craft some community tactics that are going to be able to help them achieve those goals. So like the second thing is we're going to want to partner with them. Your goals are their goals. And so if we can find community tactics that can help them achieve those goals, then we can have another team invested in the creation of content on and for our community. Let me say that part again. If we can find community tactics that can help them achieve their goals, then we can have another team invested in the creation of content on and for the community. That was me just now, in case you didn't notice. But as you continue to build this out, you can use the wins with other teams to get more and more stakeholders invested in the community. Tying their wins to the success of community means that you're building a sense of ownership over its future. And so let's talk a little bit about the data. Who here has access to data, has support from their data? Yes or no? Not me. Yep. Relatable. Yes, Lou. Love that. Some support, says Laura. Yep. That feels fair. N says I do. Aaron says some. Not much from Jenny. Yes, that's exactly the way we want to have from this nice community versus a partner. Yeah. Going from nice to have versus a partner. Love that from Heather. We have some support from Ava. It was never clear to me how much. Oh, Molly. Absolutely, that resonated. Okay, so the event description of this webinar said that this is a practical guide to teach you how to effectively showcase the value of your community, right? Like how to use data and storytelling to effectively demonstrate the impact. And I hope you didn't interpret that as this was going to be, if you are laddering into product adoption, these are the things to measure, because then I wouldn't be able to speak to everybody. First of all, I don't know the temperature of your oven to set to, right? So what I am going to do though, is I'm going to give you some examples of what we measured at Shopify and how we presented that data, so that way, I don't know if any of you watch TikTok, but you know, those like tarot readings where they go, just take what resonates. So for this, just take what resonates. Okay. So this is cohort-based data. What we did was we were measuring for product adoption, and much like marketing, the attribution of being able to say with a surety that your program was the thing that influenced their purchase, such a hard attribution to make. But we can see marketing making those like big grandiose statements that their activations or their content was the thing that, you know, translated to a net new customer. So even with tracking links or first touch attribution, it's hard, right? And so what we decided to do was take a little bit of a different approach. We had access to our platform data. So we were on Khoros and we had a lot of access to a bunch of data, but nothing that really told a story around why our community programs were more influential than not having them. And so what we did with this cohort data was we bucketed customers and prospects into 3 buckets. The first one were ones who are aware of the product. And so for this example, we used a product that was an add-on to our existing suite. And so it costs more money. It was definitely something that had to be opted into. And so they were aware of it by a banner on their admin. And then bucket 2 was customers who were sent an invite to a community event about that product. So now they're aware of the product, but they're also aware of a community activation. And bucket 3 was people who attended that event. And so the event itself was educational in nature so that people could understand what the product did, demystify some of the things around it, and be able to give them some context as to like what actually happens when you use that product. And I want to pause here and say that I did not come up with this. I had a very smart human who was working with our team who was a nerd for data and suggested this. So shout out to Christine Silva, wherever you are right now. And we tracked the data 30, 60, and 90 days after the activation was complete to see the percentage of folks who adopted the product. So we saw a stark difference between, these are like rounded up numbers, but very close to exact. And we saw a stark difference between bucket one, those who were like maybe aware that the product existed, to bucket two, that being 3 times more likely to adopt the product by just being aware that we were offering education on it. And then bucket number 3 blew us away. And the recipe says, you know, bake times may vary, but we saw that folks were 9 times more likely to adopt the product if they came to a community activation. So this is where we get to the storytelling piece, right? Just the existence of community programming makes our customers 3 times more likely to adopt the product. That's the story. Those who attended our community activations are 9 times more likely. This means that hypothetically, the more customers that come and prospects that we get to the community, so number of members that are kept active in the community, like monthly active users or minutes online or logins, now those matter, right? So people who are more aware of our community activations are more likely to adopt our product. So these aren't just vanity metrics anymore. The mere existence of community programming made our customers 3 times more likely to adopt a product. Cool, hey? And I think like one of the strongest words that I've learned to utilize when talking about data is the word hypothetically. So yeah, hypothetically, a community can ladder up into multitudes of different business goals. And hypothetically, according to a subset of data, the existence of community programming makes our customers 3 times more likely. Hypothetically got me to a place where I felt more comfortable reporting on these metrics when I had maybe a small sample size, but this is what the data was telling me. Now the question is to how to get folks into the community. Yes, we can talk about that at a different time. But what we did was we created a monthly report card for our team. And that meant that we had something that we were able to showcase any stakeholder that was who was like becoming acquainted with the community or wanted to better understand. And in this report card, we had a reminder of what business goals we're targeting, what's been shipped. So this was a place to talk about the programs that either we as a community team had launched or we had launched with other teams and talk about their successes. We had our key metrics, which I will show how we laid those out in the next slide. We also talked about what's shipping soon. So like what teams are we working with? And we also had like a metric deep dive dump, and I'll show you kind of what that looked like. Kind of, it's a spreadsheet, but like beautified. And so this is how we laid out one of our slides. We knew that we were targeting acquisition and product adoption, and we were using engagement metrics because of that cohort data model. We were using engagement metrics to measure product adoption. So we knew that those metrics influenced product adoption. So we could talk to them as signs of success toward our business goal. And so new customers, obviously acquisition, but through that cohort data model, we were able to showcase that logins, posts, minutes online, likes, like our engagement metrics were contributing to that goal. And so this next slide is how we gave context to a bunch of data. So the slide itself would have had a spreadsheet dump of what our goal are for those metrics, how we're trending year over year, et cetera. But one column that I found really important because people don't know what it means for logins, like why are logins important? And so we had a very tiny little cell to create context. But what we did is we said, the objective is people come, the metric is logins. People chat, there's posts. People stay a while, minutes online. People learn, likes. People buy, new customers. And then that way it's giving some language to why those metrics matter. Okay. I know that was a lot. New customers. You'll get this slide after if you want to take a screenshot or anything. So to summarize this data section, we really want to know what our business goals are, first and foremost. And then once you have them, you can ask other community teams externally. This is the piece that I think when I was at Shopify, I was so wrapped up in the Shopify ecosystem. I was really good at asking other internal teams how they measure and report, but I wasn't as great at asking other community teams how they measure and report. Because it's important to get kind of this idea and remember that we're not the first ones to maybe try these things. We're the first ones with our specific community, but the way that these things are being presented or talked about in other businesses is likely not new. And then 4 is get help from your data team. And what a lovely, just put that on there, Nikki. So easy. But I heard Holly Firestone say one time in an event that you don't cash in favors, you get on their priority list. And this is in regards to the data team. So you want to tell your boss that you cannot report on data without foundational help from the data team. Ask your boss to go to the boss of the data team and get added to their priority list. Because if you make it your boss's problem, then you're more likely to see traction, unfortunately. Because if you're cashing in a favor, you're not a priority. And we're getting close to the end of this presentation. And so I want you to start thinking of some questions. I see we do have one in the Q&A already, but just a reminder to get some questions in. And I wanted to, tracking those wins means nothing if no one hears about it. That's why we created a monthly report card. I would be able to utilize that report card when I went to other teams to talk about the things we were working on, what we've actually shipped and what's worked, what things we were laddering into. And I was a broken record. And so I want to introduce you to the marketing rule of 7s. And the marketing rule of 7 states that potential customer, actually, I think, Rachel, you've heard this before, but a potential customer must see a message at least 7 times before they'll be provoked to take an action. And this marketing principle is a maxim that was developed in 1930s by the movie industry, who found through research that a potential moviegoer had to see a movie poster at least 7 times before they would go to the theater to see that movie. And I know that we can feel like a broken record, but talking about the success of our programs means it's not bad to be known for being proud of your program, right? And the reality is that our colleagues are busy with their own things. So it's possible that they didn't see our message last time, or they forgot about it. It's not top of mind. So keep shouting your successes loud and often. And so this is the last slide. We've got a summary. Rachel says it's blowing my mind that it takes 7 times, right? Yeah, I don't love that point, if I'm being honest, because you do feel like you're being a broken record. But in reality, it's helpful. It's helpful that people know the context of why you're doing things, how they're working. People love updates sometimes. And so, of course, we want to focus on the things that we can control. Sometimes this isn't necessarily new or revolutionary, but we forget to follow the plan, and we want to clearly understand the business goals that we ladder into. We want to make realistic goals based on what we have at our disposal. If you don't work on the community full time, or you don't have the resources to develop programming, then maybe you can only have one business goal. But be realistic and make sure you've got the right goals that you're attracting. And then you want to partner across the business. You want to make some friends. Cross collaboration is really, really important because we are usually small teams and have a small amount of time. And so creating those partnerships are going to be able to help us to create advocates for us. And then you want to follow the data, understand what it means, ask questions, be curious. I didn't get into community management because I love data. I don't know who did. And so it's really important to remember that, it's okay to not have a strong suit. Maybe data is your strong suit, but for me, it's one of those things that I do because I want to prove the success of my programs. And then shout your successes out loud, metrics and stories. Make sure you're telling a story that's going to be really compelling. Like, if someone is aware of our community programming, they're 3 times more likely to adopt our products. Mind-blowing stuff, right? And tell them to everyone. So if you have any questions that you don't get answered today, then feel free to hit me up on social media. You can find me at Nikki2987 everywhere, and says that they love data. But we're going to get to questions. I see there's 3 in the Q&A. But if you have any follow-up ones, I am an open book. Please do send me a message and connect with me on different platforms. But let's go ahead, and I'm going to stop sharing. And nope, that's not how you do it. That is though.
I really loved the Shopify, the practice that you followed to communicate the value. Awesome. Should we start tackling the questions?
I would love to.
So the first question is from Christopher. So do you have any recommendation for templates for monthly report card?
Yeah, so the slide that I had about what we included, that's what I would include. I would say you want to include as little information as possible because people are going to be scrolling through this. Make sure you have like your top story of like what you shipped in this last month. If you don't have something you shipped, just include a previous win. But I would take a look at the slide deck afterward and just make sure you're including all of those like 4 or 5 things.
Okay, so the next question is, I struggle with building a community at a startup where things are changing so fast. Any advice? Yeah, I mean, it's not related to that topic, but I believe many community managers might be struggling with similar kind of challenges.
Yeah. So I'm working in contract right now, and it's at a startup-ish place. And what's interesting about startups is that there's pivoting priorities all the time. But what I suggest is you can still have long-term goals while still trying to contribute to those short-term ones. And then just reminding your leadership that it's really important to stick to a plan. I know that sometimes people are like, but the MQLs, give us MQLs. And you're like, great. But our plan on the community it's a long-term investment, and we can do some minor activations that could maybe help contribute to MQLs. But what we really were aiming to do with this community is whatever it is that you're trying to do. So I think just like gentle reminders about, the strategy that you've agreed upon, and then some offer to help here and there. One suggestion is set the expectation right first. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is from Christopher. The reason I asked the other question is because I'm not great at creating things from scratch. Okay, so it's about the template question.
Yeah.
But we have answered it. Did you want to add anything else to it?
Yeah, all I would say is go into Canva and utilize their templates and just choose, like, what's really important, Christopher, is that the information's in there. It's not necessarily important that you have something that looks incredible. That can come down the line, but making sure that so the list of things, like, what are you working on? What have you shipped? And what are you trying to, what metrics are you trying to contribute to? Those things you're going to be able to pull and just put on one slide each. And I think that's going to be helpful. And if you're looking for like templates of slide deck presentations, either ask your company. Sometimes they have like a template for slide decks, or go to Canva and use one of their templates.
Okay, so the next question is about the insight that you shared about the 20, 10%, 30%, 90% impact. So how did you make sure that it was not a selection bias? Users who were more likely to buy the upgrade were already registered, and probably that is something that the question is about that. This is something my team has a challenge with.
Users who are more likely to buy the upgrade registered for the community event and therefore skewed the results. Oh yeah, okay. This is so really good question. So I'm going to be honest, we had a really giant pool of customers, like 2 million customers on a platform. You do end up having a little bit more ability to anonymize things, but I think like you can't know, honestly, if someone's going to be more likely to buy the product. I think one of the things that I've seen a lot in the contracts I've had in the last 7 months is that there's a lot of times like budgets are pulled and you can't get them to buy the product. And so whether or not they're really engaged doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to result in that purchase. And so I honestly didn't see that being an issue, but I do want to add that it could be because we had a big set of merchants or customers to pull from.
So the next question is from Maria. How can you engage people in your community?
Yeah, so this comes down to understanding your oven. So your members, what is it that they want? What is it that they need? And then what is it that you're trying to achieve? So for example, I run the community, which is a community for senior community professionals. And we only just started in November, and I had an activation called the Together series, and no one showed up. And so I was like, oh, heck, I wonder why. And so I talked to some of the members, and I also had run a survey asking what they had wanted. And the resounding information I got back was that they just don't have time. They don't have time to come to an hour event and to chat with people. So what I did is I iterated, and now we have synchronous time of text. It's called happy hour, and people can come to Slack, and for an hour on Tuesdays, they know that other people are going to be there. And we had our first one yesterday, and it went really well. And I also started something called power ups. And so it's like 30-minute little moments where people can meet together. And so for my community, it was, they want to engage, but they just don't have the time. So what can I create to make it so that they can engage in this space? And so I think this will be really important for you too.
Okay, awesome. The next question is from Molly. So let's say we're interviewing for a community job, and the company is asking about metrics, and they're extremely data driven. On a high level, what are some suggestions for providing an answer that rocks their socks off? I think awesome questions.
Yeah, so I think like one of the things that I would want to know is what have they done in the past? What business, like I would ask, the finding goals slide, Molly, that said like, what does the business unit care about? What do the executives care about? And I would say like, I would get curious about those things. And then if you haven't had exact experience having, I'm just going to go back to the question. If you haven't had exact experience with that data, I would talk about like what you would do instead of what you have done. But I think like most people like it when you talk about them and making it action oriented. Like if I were to report on data, I would get curious about these things, and this is how I would present it. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, so next question is from Jennifer. My community launched in December. How do you navigate data collection differently with a brand new community versus a more established community?
Yeah, this is a great question, Jennifer. Data collection with a brand new community versus an established one, I actually don't change my I guess actually that's not true. The data collection that's automatic isn't changed. So those things are going to be the same. The more manual things like doing user research, so interviewing some of your members, that kind of data collection, you're going to be doing more in a brand new community than you would be doing in a more established community because you have more time. The things at the beginning are the things that don't necessarily scale. So for example, with the community, with our new set of cohort that came in, I personally met with every single human that came in the door. And I'm not going to be able to do that forever, but that is something that early days will be able to establish a tone within the community that's going to be able to help. But the data that I pull from that is what do they want to see? And having those one-on-ones is going to be really important.
Okay, so one follow-up question based on this.
Mm.
So for example, in the beginning, when a community starts, it's more aligned to maybe a particular department, let's say maybe marketing, maybe product, maybe support or success. So in that phase, probably the goals could be more well defined because they might have to track a singular target. And when the community is more established, they might be entrenched into other departments as well. So they could be driving different goals for different departments. I mean, I'm talking about a more mature community. So maybe that could also impact the way you are collecting data.
I would say that like you should, one of the things, so given my background at Shopify, I talk a lot to business owners. And one of the things that people talk about is like, oh, I'm not ever going to I'm not sending out email newsletters. So why would I collect emails? And it's so when you are ready to collect emails, or to send newsletters, sorry, you have the emails to send your newsletter out to. And this is the same theory is your data collection, you should want to collect as much data as possible, no matter if you're using that data or not, so that when you do choose to use that data, you're not going to have to net new start that capability. The difference when you are more established is how you use that data. But I think the collection piece is likely similar. You're going to want to collect what you can at all parts of the business or its maturity.
Thanks so much. And the next question is from Trace. Our goal for our forum is community. It's not open to non-customers, so we cannot track sales. And we don't use it to offset support, so we cannot really track decreased support tickets. Any creative ideas to regularly report on an engaged and happy community?
Yeah, so for a customer community, you're going to want to look at retention as one of the metrics that you're going to want to report in. And you're going to want to figure out what metrics influence retention. And so hypothetically, do you love that term? Hypothetically, your engagement metrics would ladder into your retention goal. And so you would want to make sure that they're there, that they're participating, they're being proactive, and the folks who are more closely tied to your community are going to know, like, and trust the brand a lot more. And so I would report on those engagement metrics as a form of retention.
One more question, which is about finding a balance between company's goal and the things that community members might be looking at. So how do you create that sort of balance?
Yeah, so I think like one of the truths of being a community manager is that you're the gatekeeper between the business and its members, the community members. And that's like one of the hardest things to respect. And so it's your job to make sure that the community is going to be wanting to engage and getting value. And so from the start, it's really important to educate the business on how to build those relationships and how you can't be, pillaging that community for MQLs. when it's new and you're looking to give value before you ask for value. And so a lot of the times, finding that balance is a little bit, it's a little difficult. But what I would recommend is always erring on the side of giving more value to your members than you are to the business. And it'll really be important for you to internally educate on why that's important and why you're going about that, and sharing a long-term vision on what business goals you can ladder into later when you have established the trust of the community and you have the ability to create programs that are for the community but also will benefit the business. And so it's your job as the steward of that space to make sure that you're creating some, equally win-win type of business goals.
That's great. Okay, one last question from my side. Have you come across any new tool or anything that you would recommend that can sort of help community managers in terms of communicating their values? Maybe generating any kind of insight, maybe summarizing. Have you come across any new technology, new tool?
Yeah, so this kind of biased, I think, but Common Room is a tool that I've attached to our Slack community that has been able to help me summarize like the sentiment, the daily active. I get so much more analytics based out of the reporting from Common Room, and it also helps me be able to automate some workflows. So onboarding, event reminders, also like a reminder to engage in certain spaces. And so that's been really helpful for me to be able to just even take a screenshot of like what the monthly active user is and how that compares to last month and those types of things. And they have a free plan, which is dope. And so definitely would check it out if you have a Slack community.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any other question as well. Yeah. Okay, I believe we can conclude this webinar now. Thanks a lot, Nikki, for sharing your insights. And thank you all for joining us in the webinar and asking all the questions.
Yeah, thank you
And
so much for having me.